The Sony XE90 4K HDR TV, also known as the Bravia X900E in the USA, is by far the most requested review submitted to this channel. After much delay, here it is, finally. Hello everyone, my name is Vincent Teo and I'm a TV reviewer and professional calibrator. And this is the Sony KD-65XE9005, which is the 65-inch model within the Bravia XE90 series. For a mid-range model, it's fairly decently spec'd with a direct lit LED backlight with full array local dimming or FALD, native UHD panel resolution of 2160p, as well as HDR support for HDR10 and HLG formats. Compared with the step-up XE93 and XE94 series, the Sony XE90 lacks the X1 Extreme chipset and Dolby Vision support, but of course, you'd have to pay more if you want these features on the higher-end models. The design itself is lovely. The black bezel is slim and carries a Bravia inscription on the top left corner, and there's also a two-tone side trim. A Sony logo is found on the bottom of the screen, under which there's an LED illumination which you can choose to turn on or off. The panel sits on a rectangular central pedestal stand with a brushed metallic silver finish. The stand itself doesn't take up too much space at all, so it's quite easy for you to place on a narrower AV rack. For tidier cable management, Sony has provided slots integrated within the feet at the rear of the stand, which is a fantastic idea. The connections are found behind the left side of the display. Although there are 4 HDMI ports, only HDMI inputs 2 and 3 support 4K HDR playback at higher bit depth or frame rate. Note that the TV comes with an external power brick which you'll need to hide away, but luckily the connecting cables are fairly long. Let's talk about picture quality. The Sony XE90 or X900E uses a VA-type LCD panel with true RGB subpixels, which delivers deep blacks by LED LCD standards, but a narrower viewing angle compared with IPS-based LED LCDs, let alone plasmas and OLEDs. Using our own custom-ordered test pattern consisting a small white box crawling horizontally and then vertically along the edges of a black background, we counted 5 columns and 9 rows, giving us a total of 45 independently dimmable zones. By the standards of most full-array local dimming LED LCD televisions these days, this number is relatively low, and Sony's algorithm favors minimizing blooming or haloing artifact over achieving inkier blacks, so the Bravia XE90's effective black level won't be as deep as most FALD LCD TVs, as you can see from this scene in The Dark Knight Rises when Batman and Catwoman meet in an underground tunnel. Still, if you sit directly in front of the TV and use some gentle bias lighting, it's more than good enough, even in a dark room. Color accuracy is good after calibration, so memory colors such as skin tones, foliage, and sky will look natural and realistic. In HDR mode, DCI-P3 coverage was around 92%. Motion and video processing are traditional strong points of Sony televisions, and it's the same case on the Bravia XE90 or X900E. Panning shots in 24 frames per second movies are as smooth as Michael Bublé and Sam Smith lubricating each other, and you can achieve 1080 lines of motion resolution by setting motion flow to either clear or custom, which involves a bit of backlight scanning which can make the picture look dimmer, but there's always enough reserve like output from the TV to compensate. Sony's motion interpolation is generally considered to be the best in the business, introducing very little interpolation artifacts or soap opera effect in 24 frames per second movies. The LCD panel used on the Sony KD-65XE9005 has a faster response time than the one used on the 65-inch ZD9, so there's remarkably little smearing or trailing when a dark object is traveling across a light background. Screen uniformity on our review sample was very good, with no significant dirty screen effect or DSE, although the corners do appear darker very slightly, as we've seen on all Sony LED LCDs in recent years. We watched a ton of football with no complaints at all. To test upscaling, we had the luxury of comparing the Sony XE90 side by side against the flagship ZD9, which features arguably the best in-TV upscaling of all time. Both TVs are 65 inches, and the XE90 or X900E did very well indeed. On the 576i standard definition SMPTE RP133 test pattern, we could see that the ZD9 was just a tiny bit sharper and cleaner up close, but from a normal viewing distance, they look essentially identical. Of course, I'm just talking about upscaling here, especially when you're watching high-definition content. In HDR mode, peak brightness on our Sony XE9005 review unit was 880 nits after calibration, which gives a pleasing HDR effect. It's not as impactful as the Sony XE93, XE94 or ZD9 with higher peak brightness, but then again, you're not paying as much. As mentioned before, Sony's local dimming algorithm favors keeping the zones illuminated to reduce blooming or haloing artifacts. So, for example, in the opening credits from Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children, probably the most pronunciation-unfriendly title for non-native English speakers like Vinny, the blacks on the entire background will look shallower than those generated by the ZD9. But then again, this is probably not a fair comparison since the ZD9 is a flagship HDR TV with 648 zones and a price to match, and the XE90 is only a mid-range TV with 45 zones. Taking price into consideration, I think the Bravia X900E actually does a very good job. For Ultra HD Blu-rays that contain specular highlights up to 4000 nits, the Sony XE90 will discard some bright highlight detail to preserve overall brightness in its most accurate Cinema Pro preset. There is no standard for tone mapping anyway, and I can totally see Sony's point since such bright specular highlights are generally rare throughout an entire film. But judging by how the voting for the HDR section went in our recent shootout, the attendees seemed to hate missing out on highlight detail, which hurt the scores of the Sony ZD9 and A1 OLED, so perhaps there's some rethinking to be done there. The Sony XE90 or X900E is good for gaming, with Horizon Zero Dawn on PS4 Pro looking lush and detailed. Input lag measured 31 milliseconds in both 1080p SDR and 4K HDR modes, which is different from the Sony X1 Extreme TVs, which exhibit higher lag if the incoming video signal was 1080p rather than native 4K. In summary, the Sony XE90 or X900E delivers very strong picture performance for the price. It uses a VA LCD panel with deep blacks and fast response time. Motion and video processing are excellent. Colorimetry is very good after calibration. The screen is very uniform except for some very mild dark corners. Input lag is low enough for an immersive gaming experience, either in 1080p SDR or 4K HDR, and HDR presentation is decent without paying more for the higher peak brightness on the XE93 or XE94 or the pixel level illumination on the OLEDs. For many prospective buyers, the dilemma will be between the Sony XE90 and the step-up XE93. Is it worth paying £500 to £700 more for the XE93? Having tested both TVs extensively, I think any upscaling improvement provided by the X1 Extreme chipset is marginal at best, so in reality, you are essentially paying for higher peak brightness, for a more impactful HDR experience, and Dolby Vision support in the future, which actually may help with better highlight detail retention in the brighter scenes and better backlight management in the darker scenes to achieve an inkier blacks without causing excessive blooming or haloing artifacts. If you can stretch your budget, I'd go for the XE93, but make no mistake, the XE90 still provides exceptional value for money. If you found this video useful, please click the like button and subscribe to the HDTV Test YouTube channel for more videos like this. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you the next time.